Afternoon and welcome back to Tactics Board. It's one of those championship weeks and Norwich City are back in action this weekend. Off the back of 4 pretty poor results and performances, they really do need to get a result out of the bag for their narrative and probably for the narrative around David Wagner, because of course the last 2 of those fixtures were defeats on the spin at Carrow Road, and you can sense the fan base sort of turning on him and that narrative getting quite difficult for him. So a vitally important game for Norwich, but against a Sunderland side who have looked quite good throughout the campaign. They have struggled in their last couple of games, but other than that, tactically they look a very good side. Of course, they've got a number of good players and they look like they're looking to build on their success last season. So not an easy game by any means. I'd even suggest that Sunderland go into this game as quite strong favourites, but I'm going to take a look at how I expect the game to unfold and the 11 that I think Wagner will choose for the game. So without further ado, here's my predicted 11 for Norwich City's trip to the Stadium of Light. So I've gone with George Long in goal, Jack Stacey at right back, Shane Duffy and Ben Gibson at centre back, with Dimitris Yannoulis at left back, Gabriel Sara and Kenny McLean in the centre of midfield, Jonathan Rowe on the right, Borja Sainz on the left, with Adam Eder up front and Marcelino Nunez just behind him. So to go from the back, I've got George Long in there because Angus Gunn, as Wagner revealed post-match, is going to miss the next 3 games before the November international break. He's expected back after them. But in the meantime, I think Norwich have a pretty decent keeper to sort of tide them over. I don't think there's much he could have done about any of the 5 goals he's conceded against Leeds and Middlesbrough. Hasn't really made any significant errors and has actually made some pretty decent stops. I think both of those sides that have visited Carrow Road will probably have felt they could have scored more goals, but Long made some pretty decent saves. And although I don't feel entirely secure about his abilities from distance in terms of facing shots from long range, I think there are definitely some good sides to his game, and on the ball he's pretty good. So to be fair, as far as second choice championship goalkeepers go, I think Norwich have got a pretty decent one and he should tie them over for the next few games at least. Jack Stacey at right back is somebody who I've continually spoken about the need to improve his consistency. I thought against Middlesbrough he was a driving force attack-wise and he combined well with Jonathan Rowe, but his end product wasn't really where it has been at times this season. He couldn't really find any of the strikers with his crossing, and a number of times they hit the first defender that they could have done, and you just wonder where those sort of abilities have gone. I wonder if it's a confidence thing, having come into a very successful team, of course, and a team that was in form at the start of the season, to now be in a team that's struggling, especially having not played this number of games in a row for a really long time. I just wonder if it's a sort of confidence issue or a continuity issue, and that might be somewhere where Wagner is looking at a change quite soon. Of course, Kellen Fisher hasn't really played at this level too much, but he's shown promise where he has in sort of cup competitions and as a substitute. And I think probably the pressure is increasing on Jack Stacey to prove himself again, really. But he probably is quite secure, given Wagner likes to have a stable back 4, and that's the reason why I've got Shane Duffy and Ben Gibson at centre-back. And I don't blame them for everything, because I think they're really struggling from a lack of protection from the midfield. That's one of the main tactical problems with Norwich at the moment. Not only the fact that they use 2 central midfielders, which was pretty much decided as outmoded more than 15 years ago, but they don't even have a typical defensive one in that 2. So it's definitely a problem for those centre-backs that they're overly exposed. But I also think when you've conceded the number of goals that you do have to look at that defence and maybe consider changing it. But Wagner is so keen and stubborn that he's going to have a settled defence, and I don't know what I'd be thinking if I was Danny Bart, having made the move, of course, from Sunderland this summer. But he seems keen to keep those 2 in there, and to be fair, I don't think they did too much wrong against Middlesbrough. Again, that was more the problems in front of them. I think Gibson is very key to the way that Norwich build the ball out from the back, and Shane Duffy, although he hasn't been at his absolute best in the last few games, has shown that he can be a very good defender at this level. So hopefully Wagner somehow finds a way of improving that tactical solidity defensively and allows those 2 to shine, because early in the season they definitely were. But at the moment, the defence just isn't tactically where it needs to be, and I think that's mainly why they're struggling. On the left, I've got Dimitris Yannoulis, who of course was culpable for that first Middlesbrough goal, gave the ball away very, very cheaply indeed, but again, it's the gap between him and the players backing him up, and that is quite significant. I thought Przemysław Płacheta impressed as a substitute against Middlesbrough, but I think increasingly he's proving himself more an option in that sense than a starting option. Of course, he worked his way up to a starting berth, having impressed as a substitute in cup competitions, but didn't really impress in those 2 games when he started, and I'm not sure he's done enough to earn a start again, even though Yunus did make a significant error. I think he's one of Norwich City's best technical players at the moment and suits Wagner's system in terms of wanting attacking from those fullbacks. Of course, you could call into question some of those tactical principles given how they're working out at the moment, but in terms of who fits into there, and Wagner isn't going to change overnight, I think Yunus still fits there very, very well. In midfield, I've got Gabriel Sara and Kenny McLean. Obviously, you will have heard me already banging on for a few minutes about the need for some protection for them and a little bit more solidity in the midfield. Perhaps you could say that their performances need to be better defensively as well. In any case, it looks like a problem area when it was actually one of the best parts of this Norwich City team early on in the season. So I don't quite know what's gone wrong there. Perhaps he could look at strengthening it with Forshaw or Gibbs or Jakob Sorensen when he comes back from injury. But again, through the middle of the pitch, we haven't seen much change. And given how reliable those two have been at doing what Wagner wants for most of the season, of course, 2 of Norwich's most talented players, you know, all-rounders as well, in the team, I'd expect to see them in the team for Saturday and probably for a long time after that. And then on the right wing, I've got John Rowe, who was the only player that impressed me against Middlesbrough, really. I thought he was really, really good. The way he carries the ball at pace and has such control, even when he's almost at sprinting pace, is absolutely fantastic. And he was the only one that looked a real danger to the Borough defence. Of course, scored that fantastic goal late on in the game, which sadly for him won't be remembered by many because of the role it played as a simple consolation in quite a disappointing defeat. But it was a fantastic goal, having watched the replay. And he's probably the first name on the team sheet at the moment. He's been absolutely fantastic. And to be fair to him, hasn't dropped his level as a lot of his teammates have. And for somebody of his age, that's not necessarily what you'd expect. So all credit goes to him. It's probably a case more now of enjoying watching him in yellow and green, because if he can keep this up until the end of the season and Norwich don't get promoted, it feels quite likely that he goes to the Premier League without them. So I've got him on the right. On the left, I've got Borja Sainz, because I think he showed enough in that game to warrant a start, although he maybe didn't produce much in terms of end product. He had 1 shot from long range that span quite far wide. I think given the dearth of options otherwise, Christian Fasnacht is obviously out of form. I know Hernandez did very little. I spoke about Płacheta's struggles when he's started in the team. It surely makes sense to put your marquee summer signing in there, especially given that promising performance against Middlesbrough. He's a very key part of the press when he is in that team. I thought the energy he showed was fantastic, and he actually underlined his game very early on after coming on against Middlesbrough. Won a corner, the Barkley roared, and that's the role that he's going to play, really. So hopefully he can start in that game. I expect Wagner will choose him and that he can get up to the levels that Norwich need, because they do need probably another couple of threats in the attacking areas and not just Jonathan Rowe doing everything the whole time. And speaking of that, hopefully Marcelino Nunez is another one who can pick up the levels we've seen from him previously. When he arrived on the scene, of course, that's more than a year ago now, but I remember the excitement around him and how good he was technically, the audacity of the Panenka in a penalty shootout against Birmingham, just the excitement that there is around him, or was around him, has now almost completely died out. And you can still see the talent. There's still times in a game where he'll send over a fantastic pass from one side of the pitch to the other, or he'll show an unbelievable amount of control, but you just wonder if the concentration is there for him. He seems to go missing quite a lot in games. He seems to lose possession when he shouldn't be. And I think somebody needs to work with him to maximise the best of his abilities, because clearly Norwich have found a very rough diamond. But I think he is a player who could go on and achieve big things. But that's up to your coach. It's probably looking at Dean Smith and his staff, and now Wagner and his staff, and they haven't been able to get the best out of him yet. But Norwich don't have too many options there. They've tried many, many things, and they haven't really worked. So I think Nunez, having received praise from Wagner after the game, has done enough to earn another start. And up front, Adam Eder, I thought, played quite well against Middlesbrough. To be fair to him, I think there was a question over whether maybe there was some boos for him as he was replaced by Yujo Huang. late in that game, but I think it was more boos for the substitution, actually. I think it was the Barkley wanting to show that they weren't happy with Eder being taken off, because they immediately chanted his name as soon as those boos had sort of died out. So, yeah, I think he did very well in that game, although he wasn't presented with chances. Admittedly, against Leeds, he went through a couple of times and probably should have done better. But I think his hold-up play is improving, his linking with other players is improving. He is a presence up front now where he didn't really used to be. And although he maybe hasn't improved at the rate needed to replace Josh Sargent and Ashley Barnes, I think he is getting there and showing positive signs, and did enough to start in this Sunderland game. But there's my 11. I'm just going to quickly highlight an area of danger I think Norwich need to look out for, and that's the wide areas. Sunderland interchange very well, and they have a lot of players in there. Jack Clarke is somebody who most Norwich fans will be aware of as somebody who's shone in the Championship so far. And against Jack Stacey, who seems to be struggling to get both up and down the pitch at the moment, his pace and counter-attacking ability could really exploit Norwich and their weakness in that area. On the right, there's a bit of tactical complexity that Norwich could struggle with. Roberts and Barr interchange very well on that right, and although both of those end up in different positions, Roberts is sometimes in a sort of number 10 role, sometimes as a pure striker. The same with Barr, and both of them are sometimes on the right wing. Of course, they both drift out to that side and can really work effectively as an overload. So especially given Yanulis' defensive frailties in that area, it's probably going to be something where the winger on that side, who I'm expecting to be Borja Sainz, is going to need to help him out quite a lot, and going to have to be switched on, and they're going to be required to communicate very well and maybe switch markers and be wary of the overload that's going to happen there. They might even need some help from Kenny McLean coming over from midfield. So that's definitely an area to be wary of. I do think this is a Sunderland team that have the qualities and the ability to beat Norwich. And to be honest, it's a sad state of affairs, but they would have looked at their fixture list, having been beaten by Leicester on Tuesday night, and gone Norwich at home. That's a winnable fixture, and that shouldn't really be a position Norwich are ever in the Championship. But that's where they are now. Hopefully they can pick up that form again. Of course, we'll have every kick covered across our channels during that game. So head over to pinkham.com. If you want to subscribe to Pinkham Plus, it's $1.99 for the first 2 months, and then only $2.99 thereafter. You can access an exclusive interview with Josh Sargent, Chris Sutton's column on David Wagner and why he thinks Ben Napper needs to come into the building now, and much, much more. There's plenty of good stuff over there, and keep it locked to our YouTube channel for David Wagner's press conference, terrace talk, loads of other stuff ahead of the game and after it. So yeah, thank you for joining me for Tactics Board, and I'll see you here again soon.